Hail and well met, my dudes. My name is IR Chris from Twitter. Step into my corner, where I will share with you what I have learned running one-shots and games through Dungeon Crawl. First thing I'll be talking about is creating and running one-shots. A one-shot is different from your normal D&D campaign. Wherein a campaign is a long series of games, a one-shot, as the name indicates, is a single game. Here I'll narrow down exactly what I use to prepare myself for a single game for Dungeons & Dragons. Part 1. Planning! Planning is a very important part of starting really anything. In a campaign, an idea can evolve around what your players decide to do, where they decide to go, and how they conduct themselves. It can be a lot more free-form and flowing. One-shots don't really have that luxury. If you plan on running a 3-hour game, you may only have enough time for a single encounter, with some role-playing in between, of course. So the ability to tell a story is a little more difficult. Also take into consideration that your players will probably want to interact in character and get to know each other PC. Allow these interactions to happen, but be conscious about time. I find that with the RP, I usually can only run about one single encounter during a 3-hour one-shot. Sometimes I base a one-shot off of an NPC I have in mind whose tragic story requires the PCs to go on a quest. Sometimes I'll base a one-shot off of a location, like a frozen tundra. It gives me an idea of what kind of creatures and monsters they would face. And with that in mind, sometimes I will even base a one-shot off of a particular monster I want to run. Perhaps a Leshen who is corrupting a gentle, peaceful wood, or a dragon that is pillaging a town. Your story does not have to be elaborate. As a matter of fact, it might be better off if it's simple. My husband disappeared into the woods during the full moon, or a noble wishes to hire you to take out a group of bandits who are ruthless and evil. That can lead to a lot more elaborate storytelling later on. Maybe you can add in slight twists that the PCs don't expect, making the story all the more dynamic. I can talk about counterbalancing, but honestly, that's another video entirely. Maybe the next one I make, we shall see. Part 2! Running the game! The most important thing you can do before you start running a one-shot is to remind your players what your playstyle is like. Let them know of any house rules you have, let them know how difficult you plan to make this one-shot, and just make sure you're all on the same page. You don't want to upset players just because you weren't able to communicate correctly. I normally allow my players to decide whether or not they've been traveling together for a long time or if they just met up as a group. Once I have that established, I usually go one of two ways. I will allow them to find whoever is giving them this job or this quest and allow them to interact, ask questions, gain more information, and even figure out what their reward's going to be. This is a great way to incite role-playing and attempt to engage everybody. Allow them to feel out their adventurer and really get into character. If I'm feeling particularly strongly about the group, like these players are already extremely in character, I can also start them off with a battle almost immediately. As you're walking down the road towards the town that you were trying to get to, you hear an explosion and a horde of orcs pours out in front of you. Roll initiative. Battle is another way to make it easier for your players to interact with each other. Once the characters are doing cool things, getting kills, casting spells, etc., they will all be more able to relate to something, as they've just gone through a battle together. They will better understand how that character is played, so that future role-playing might be a little bit easier. If you run this carefully, you might even be able to run more than a single encounter in your one-shot. It can be tight, but it's definitely doable. Part 3. Boss fights, yo! If you plan on having more than one encounter in your one-shot, or any encounter at all, make sure you consider the second encounter to be the boss fight. Not all one-shots must have a boss fight, but adding a villain the party must overcome can be pretty rewarding. In one of my one-shots that I ran for Dungeon Crawl, I told the party that they were in a war against a Minotaur horde. They were being sent as a small unit to infiltrate past enemy lines and hit a camp where both a general of Baphomet resided as well as a mage who had been destroying the front lines with blasts of fire. They ended up getting past enemy lines only to run to a scouting party of Minotaur. After taking them out, the party swiftly moved up the valley, hoping that the general and mage hadn't heard their fight and fled. Luckily, they'd killed all the scouts quickly enough that the general had no idea they were coming. They swarmed the camp and took out all the Minotaur, including the general and the mage, essentially ending the war. There was a great sense of pride in them, in accomplishing a difficult feat and ending the war against the horde. And when they returned to camp, there was much drinking and rejoicing. They felt as though they were part of a great story, and they were. You want your players to feel like heroes, or villains, depending. You want them to talk about how they saved a father's life, or ended a war, or maybe even started one. One-shots don't have to be perfect, they don't have to be long, but they can be extremely memorable. I'm Chris Wharton. Thanks for coming to my corner. Now, get out of here, please. Got some shit I gotta do. Bye!